Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head over to Germany once again, and we're going to continue on with this little mini series of German beer reviews that I've been doing for you on the channel over the last few videos. Now, for this review, we are returning to a brewery that's featured on the channel once before. These guys are, however, a very famous brewery and part of a group of very famous breweries from a quite well-known beer part of Germany. And the main reason that I haven't really reviewed too many more beers from these guys is that you just don't come across them all that often, either here in Scotland or back over in Sweden, and I'm not sure of what the exact reason for that is. But the beer itself is a style that I very much enjoy. I would say it's one of my favourite German beer styles, and it's quite rare to actually come across this particular example of this style as well. So needless to say, I'm very, very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then we are going to head to the city of Munich, München, the capital of Bavaria, Bayern, in the southeastern part of Germany, and we're going to have a look at my second beer from Löwenbräu, or Lionbräu I guess as it would be in English. So this particular beer is their Triumphator, or Triumphator I guess you would pronounce it in German. This one comes in at, I believe, 7.6% ABV, and this is a Doppelbock. So yeah, the only other beer that I've reviewed on the channel before from Löwenbräu was the Oktoberfest beer, and like I said, I just don't come across the Löwenbräu stuff all that often, so I will need to make a point of getting a hold of some other Löwenbräu beers the next time I go down to Munich, because they're very easy to get there for obvious reasons. So yeah, I think this will be toward the end of the Munich 6 Doppelbock. We've reviewed quite a few different ones. The Paulaner Salvator was, I think, another hard one to get, but we did manage to get that done, so I will need to check and see what Doppelbocks we still have remaining from the Munich 6 breweries. But yeah, really excited to review this one, the Löwenbräu Triumphator. Let's crack on then and see what this beer is going to have in store for us. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Löwenbräu before, and we will see about adding more to that list at some point in the fairly near future, once I can get a hold of their beers of course. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that, of course, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the German playlist along with a number of other things, and that is being added to quite regularly at the moment, and we will see about continuing that as time goes on. But make sure you check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well. There are some really interesting things on the channel at the moment. But yes, this one is the Triumphator, a 7.6% Doppelbock from Löwenbräu in Munich in Bavaria in Germany. Let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about the company. So the exact foundation date of Löwenbräu isn't actually definitively known. Some sources have cited the year 1383 as the foundation year. However, 1524 was the year that Georg Schnatter was brewing beer in Löwengrube 17, or Löwengrube 17 in Munich, and this is thought to be the first reference to Löwe, or the lion. But the first official record of the name Löwenbräu in Munich was in 1746 in the official brewer's registry of the city. But within the brewery there was a painting depicting the story of Daniel and the lion from the Bible, and this is why the name Löwenbräu, or Lionbräu, was chosen. But in 1818 the brewery was purchased by Georg Brey, who established the brewery as one of the premier breweries in the city city of Munich. But in 1827, the brewery moved to a bigger premises in Nymphenburger Straße in the Wiesenfeld district of the city. But in 1848, the brewery received license to brew Bock beers and was one of the pioneers in this field, and Georg's son Ludwig took over the running of the brewery in the year 1851. By 1864, the brewery had 25% of the market share of all beer sales in Munich, making them the largest brewery in the city. But the Bray family sold the brewery in 1872, and then it became a publicly traded company and underwent quite serious modernisation. But 1883 saw the company open the famous Löwenbräu Keller at Stiegelmeierplatz near the brewery, and in 1886 they registered the famous lion as a trademark. But the brewery won the grand prize in Paris at the World Expedition in 1900, and by 1912 they were producing 1 million hectolitres of beer per year. As is the case with many breweries in Germany, they had a shortage of material to contend with and restrictions on their brewing during the period of the First World War, so they produced what was known as a Dun beer, or a low alcohol beer, and by the end of the war the brewing capacity had shrunk by around 50%. But the brewery grew their export market again in the 1920s, and in 1921 the Unionsbrauerei Schulein merged with Löwenbräu, and Hermann Schulein became the company director, and the brewery began brewing this Triumphator Doppelbock beer in 1925, and they introduced a Weiss beer 2 years later. But in 1928 they also became the first Munich brewery to brew over 1 million hectolitres of beer per year, and they were the official provider, provisor, is that the right word? The official beer brand, if you like, for the Zeppelin airships. But the Schulein family were Jewish, and so they fled to the US in 1936, and the name Löwenbrauerei was adopted in 1942 as the official name of the brewery to replace Aktienbrauerei zum Löwenbräu. But after the war, the Schulein family agreed to the continuation of the brewery, and the first exports began from the resurrected operation, if we can call it that, in 1948, and the brewery has continued to grow steadily ever since. But in 1950 they introduced the famous Löwenbräu mechanical line at the Oktoberfest, and since the Second World War the majority shareholder in the brewery was August von Fink for many years, and he passed the brewery on to his son, who oversaw the merger of the Spaten and Löwenbräu breweries back in 1997. But Jobst Kaiser Eichberg took control of the brewery in 2003 before they became part of the Interbrew Group, which in turn merged with Ambev to become AB InBev, and since Spaten had already merged with Franziskaner, this company, the company that Löwenbräu is part of, is known as the Spaten Franziskaner Löwenbräu Gruppe. But yeah, they are part of the AB InBev family, if you like. So yeah, that I think is everything I can tell you about Löwenbräu for the moment. A little bit of a complex history there with lots of different names mentioned and different things going on, but these guys are one of the famous Munich 6 breweries. So if you get the chance to try their beers, it is definitely worth doing, and I'm pretty sure I have been to the Löwenbräu Beer Garden in Munich as well. But yeah, that's another out and about series of videos that I do want to make. I want to go down to Munich and try some of the different beers on tap at the different beer gardens there. So we'll see about making that happen at some point in the fairly near future. But yeah, as I say, that's everything I can really tell you about Löwenbräu for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about the different beers that Löwenbräu have released over the years. But yeah, let's go on then and actually have a little look at the beer itself. So as I mentioned to you earlier, this one is a 7.6% Doppelbock, and of course all of the Doppelbocks usually have their name ending in OR of some description. So yeah, this one is called Triumphator, as a tribute to the story of Daniel and the lion, which you can see depicted on the label there, which is pretty cool. But there you can see it, Löwenbräu Triumphator, and they've also got this nice little top label there, which is the Löwenbräu lion. So yeah, you can see that's also on the bottle cap there, so I need to try and take this one off carefully and save the bottle cap. But yeah, 7.6% EBV, this one, a half-litre bottle. I don't think we need to say anything else about the appearance of that, so let's get the beer out into the glass and see what it's all about. Really curious to try this one And as I say, Löwenbräu are one of the big German breweries that I really need to you know, look at again. So yeah, looks very nice. So beer out into the glass. Let's see what we get from this one. I'll try to give it a little bit of an aggressive pour so we get some head on it, because you do want your German beers to have a nice little bit of foam. I think that was not bad. Not perfect, but not bad. So there you are. And this beer, I have to say, has poured pretty much as you would expect from any German Doppelbock. So yeah, you can see that it's poured with just under a finger of a frothy, I would say kind of light beige, almost fawn coloured head. You can see that there are smaller bubbles toward the surface of the liquid, but it's got a few kind of bigger ones just the further that you go up the head there. But it does look very, very nice, and that head is of course starting to fade away and be a thinner, more foamy there, and it will keep going. But you can see there's not too much in the way of visible carbonation in this beer. One or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, but a few little ones going up toward the surface of the beer there. But colour wise, this one is absolutely beautiful. It's got that lovely dark chestnutty colour to it, and it's got a little bit of a kind of ruby note in there. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts that you put into the beer will affect its colour as well. But when it comes to German Doppelbocks, at least, you don't often have to care about those particular variables. Some of the American brewed Doppelbocks, they will play around with adjuncts and things, but yeah, not the traditional old school German ones. I have to say as well, this beer, it has a little bit of natural haze to it, but if you shine the light through it, it is actually pretty damn clear. But in terms of what you would expect colour wise and appearance wise from a Doppelbock, this one is pretty much right on the money. This is also, when I think about it, this is one of the few Doppelbocks you'll see that doesn't have a goat on the label. So the story behind that is that the Bock beers originally come from the city of Einbeck, and when they took their beers down to Munich, the Münchners made fun of the Einbeckers' accent and called the beers, you know, they said, oh, these are Einbeckers, but to them it sounded like Bock, and Bock is the word for goat, so that's why many Doppelbocks bear a goat on their label or artwork or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, a little bit of a sidetrack there, but as I say, appearance wise this one is nothing surprising for the style. Let's have a wee look at the aroma then and see what this one is going to have in store for us. Really curious about this. Oh, that's really nice. I'm going to say straight from the outset, this is one of the kind of sweeter, more brown sugary Doppelbocks that I think I've come across in quite a wee while. That's got a lovely kind of brown sugary, almost like Christmas puddingy type note to it. But yeah, you're getting everything you would expect of the style from the aroma here, but this is definitely one of the sweeter, more brown sugary Doppelbocks that I've come across for sure. So for me, it gives you everything. You've got that sweet kind of brown bready character, there's a little bit of cakiness in there, good little bit of brown sugar, as I've already said. The hoppy character is kind of what you would expect too, so a nice little bit of kind of green component coming out of this one. And then yeah, you've got a good little bit of red fruity character. But like I say, when I think about my experiences with German Doppelbocks before, this is certainly one of the more kind of oily, brown sugary leaning ones, just on the basis of the aroma. But let's break the aroma down a little bit more and describe it for you that little bit more in depth. So the backbone of this beer, absolutely, you get some of that nice kind of, you get a little bit of that kind of fresh, wholemeal, brown bready character, bread crusty type note forming the backbone of the beer. There's a little bit of woodiness in there, there's a little touch of nuttiness as well. Yeah, gives you everything you would want in that kind of thing. But above that you start to get this kind of sweeter, like pumpernickel, German brown bread. Above that, yeah, you've got a little bit of a wholemeal brown bready character as well, which is just a little bit lighter and a little bit drier. It's almost, this beer, you do have a few different kinds of breads in this one. So you get a slightly more dense rye bread, the sweeter kind of German pumpernickel, a little bit of a more wholemeal brown bready sort of thing, and then you start to get all the the kind of sweet brown sugars out of this one. There is a little bit of a kind of Christmas puddingy, Christmas cakey type note out of this one, like those kind of oily, like almost brandy, like brandy soaked bread type brown sugars coming out of this. So the brown sugar, as I say, I've said a few times, this particular Doppelbock strikes me as being quite bright and brown sugary in its character. So yeah, for me, you have some of these nice kind of leathery brown sugars. You've got a sweet, slightly toasty element in there as well. Big oily caramel, little bit of treacle and molasses in this one. Those are the words I was looking for earlier to describe that properly. So yeah, you've got this little treacle molassesy type note in this one. Straight up sweet caramel, a little bit of McVitie's digestive biscuit, and yeah, the little bit of nuttiness and woody character coming out of this one, just behind all of that. But the brown sugary notes are definitely quite complex in this beer for sure. Yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the kind of malty side of this one. On the hoppy side of things, you do get a nice little touch of smooth earthiness out of this one. There's a little bit of herbal character in there, and then you have the typical, almost, if we can call them, German noble characteristics coming out of this beer. You've got that little bit of floral character, but it's quite a smooth floral character, this one, and also the bit of a smoother kind of grassiness. When it comes to the Doppelbock style, a very popular hop to use among German brewers is the Northern Brewer, because it will give you all these kind of nice red and dark fruity type notes, and I suspect that's very much what will have been used in this one, because it's giving you very familiar notes, I should say. So for me, this beer has quite a lot of it certainly has quite a lot of like juicy plum, and at the same time I get it's quite blackcurrant heavy, I would say, on the fruity side of things too. So yeah, quite a lot of blackcurrant in this one. Good little bit of juicy fig, but not quite that sharp. And then you've got some nice juicy plummy notes as well. Of course, you've got little bits of like date and prune and stuff like that. But yeah, for me, it's a lot of plum. It's a good little bit of blackcurrant, and then yeah, it's quite, you've got little bits of fig and other wee things going on in this one too. But the aroma of this beer, I have to say, is absolutely lovely. As I've repeated a few times, it really is a more brown sugary leaning Doppelbock than a number of the other ones I've had in this particular style category. So yeah, interesting stuff. And this is one of the reasons why I always say that the Doppelbock is a brown sugary beer. It's not a chocolatey beer. I would disagree quite strongly with people who say these beers taste like chocolate. For me, no, it's all about the brown sugar, actually. But as I always say, take a wee bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think it is about time for us to try this one and see what it's all about. So yeah, this one is the Triumphator, 7.6% Doppelbock, lager beer incidentally, from Löwenbräu, one of the famous Munich 6 breweries. Let's get stuck into this one. Slange, skål, cheers. Ooh, yeah. That is very nice. The first impression I have of this one is I'm kind of surprised at how drinkable this beer is. I would certainly say that it's one of the kind of lighter and cleaner Doppelbocks that I've come across for sure. This is an interesting one. As I say, it's very light in its mouthfeel, but it gives you all the flavours that you would expect into the aftertaste. The other Doppelbocks that I've tried have been, just a bit thicker in their mouthfeel and show you the things right away. But this is one of the ones that takes a little bit of time to develop for me. But I will say straight away, it's a lovely, lovely beer, and it does give you everything that you would expect of the style. So like I was saying a minute ago, one thing we have to remember about Doppelbocks is that they are lager beers. So remember, the technical difference between a lager and an ale is that they use different kinds of yeasts and they ferment at different temperatures. So lager beers use low temperature fermentation, bottom fermenting yeasts, 8 to 12 degrees, so they take longer to condition and build up their alcohol content essentially, whereas ales use high temperature fermentation, top fermenting yeasts, and they can mature quite quickly. But yeah, for me, this is as a Doppelbock, this one seems as if it seems very clean, it seems really quite light, and on the flavour profile I would say it's actually quite a lot drier than I was expecting it to be from the aroma, but still, lovely beer this one, and it's always cool to try different beer styles from really quite famous breweries. And I love Doppelbocks, I love the big brown sugary beer styles, so Doppelbock is right up my street, and this is a lovely example of the style, as you would expect from such a famous brewery. But as I said, certainly one of the sweeter and also lighter and cleaner examples of this style that I've come across in the years on the channel. But let's do as we always do, we'll break the flavour of the beer down and describe it for you that little bit more in depth. So we'll start on the middle third of the tongue, as we usually do. Now the backbone of this beer, you have that lovely, kind of slightly drier, rye bready bread crust coming out of it. So yeah, that sits there, lovely kind of dry rye bready bread crust. As you move further forward on that middle third of your palate, you get a little touch of kind of woody character just sitting there, which is great. So yeah, lovely kind of rye bready bread crust in there, a wee bit of woodiness, and then a wee bit of nutty character just developing into the aftertaste too. So yeah, the way that goes together is really quite nice. So yeah, kind of rye bready, bread crusty character there, and it gets a bit drier into the aftertaste that you go, and then yeah, as you're just behind the kind of border region between front and middle third of your palate, you can feel a bit of woodiness in there, there's a little bit of nuttiness, and then you've got all the other bready characters just sitting on top of that. So yeah, you can feel with this beer, in that middle third of your palate, you definitely have a distinctive layer of more dense, dry, rye bready character. Above that, you have a more, you've got a more kind of pumpernickel-y type bread coming out of it. So yeah, rye bready layer, pumpernickel type bread, and then above that, you've got a more wholemeal brown bready character in there. So the different layers of these things are really quite nice, and we've seen this in the beers, in the Doppelbock beers before. But what I would say is that within the wholemeal bready layer at the top, you do get a wee bit more kind of nuttiness and things just developing out of that. The wholemeal bready character is almost a very slightly cakey, which I find quite interesting too. So yeah, that's a wee bit of food for thought with this particular beer, but I do like it, as I say. And above all of that, you start to get the brown sugars, and for me, the brown sugars are the most prominent part, and also the highlight of the beer. So above the kind of wholemeal brown bready character, you have a little bit of a you start to get the brown sugars, and for me it's interesting because you have this kind of very bright, like oily and slightly toasty brown sugary note there. It's almost like that's forming the base of the beer, and it does remind me, the brown sugary base in this beer is quite like Christmas pudding. It really is like that. Then you have another layer, you have a layer of a more kind of leathery brown sugar sitting on top of that, and then you've got a really toasty brown sugary layer coming out of the beer too, which is great. So yeah, that toasty brown sugary layer sitting there, and then in the dead centre of your palate, in the dead centre of your palate, you have a little bit more of a kind of treacle molasses type thing out of this one, which I think is great. So you've got an oily kind of treacle molasses type thing in the dead centre of your palate, but you do get a wee bit of a straight up sweet caramel just as you move further out from that. And there are little elements of kind of biscuity flavour coming out of the beer too. So yeah, the way this beer goes together from that perspective, I think, is really quite nice. The brown sugary notes, as I say, are quite different, and you've got a mix of roasty toastiness in there. You've got a brighter, more oily brown sugary character. You've got the leathery side of things. You've got treacle molasses. You've also got caramel. That's where this particular Doppelbock seems to lean, in my mind. And as you go further into the aftertaste, you get a bit more woodiness and nuttiness and things. So yeah, that covers the middle third of your palate in this beer, I would say. So on the onto the back third of your palate then, and as I've often said, the back third of your palate will give you similar flavours to the middle third of your palate. They'll just come out at different intensities, but do remember that general trend with your palate, that sweeter flavours will come out further forward and more dry and bitter flavours will come out further back. But yeah, border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of bready build up in there. The base of that border region, you've got the rye bready character, then you've got the pumpernickelly sweeter brown bread in the middle, and the kind of more wholemeal brown bready character on top of that. And then the base of that back third of your palate is the rye bready bread crust, and that feels a little bit more kind of dry and very slightly bitter there as well. And above that, you've got a little touch of an almost crackery dryness. Then you've got the rye bready layer, which feels a little bit lighter and more airy. The pumpernickel bready character, which feels a little bit lighter and more airy, and again the wholemeal brown bready character, which feels lighter and more airy. So you've got the same bready layers in there, but they just feel a little bit lighter. They just come out at different intensities. And then on top of all of that, you have a kind of toasty brown sugary character creeping over from the middle third of your palate, and then you've got a wee bit of a more kind of leathery kind of brown sugary layer just creeping over the top of that too. So yeah, the way that all of that goes together, I think, is really quite nice. And yeah, above everything else, you do get this little bit of yeasty character on that back third of your palate. So the yeasty character for me is like a very sweet and dense pumpernickel brown bread. It's got a little bit of woodiness to it, but then it's wrapped in this very, very sweet, kind of quite bright, almost treacly type flavour. So yeah, that's the yeasty character just sitting above everything else on the back third of your palate. So definitely the back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. But I think that's everything we really need to say about the yeasty and malty side of this beer. So let's go to the green component then. In the back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of smooth earthiness in there. As you move further forward, it's a little bit herbal, but you can feel that as you come toward the kind of front corners of your palate, you've got a lovely little bit of like floral aromaticity. And yeah, as I said, I think that goes together really nicely. So yeah, lovely little bit of brighter floral aromaticity in there. Has a wee touch of spiciness to it as well, which is interesting. But yeah, then round the front curve of your palate, you've got that lighter, grassier note there. It's actually quite a wet, grassy character that you get out of this beer. But then the further into the aftertaste you go, you start to get a wee bit more earthy and herbal note from the green component in this beer too. But I do really quite like how that pieces together. So that gets a thumbs up from me. On the the green component, I think that's everything we need to say. So we can round off the tasting section with a wee look at the front third of your palate and the fruity side of things. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a nice little bit of bready build up in there. You can feel a wee bit of the rye bread in the base of the beer, so yeah, a nice little bit of rye bready character in there. On top of that there's the sweeter pumpernickel again, then you've got the wholemeal brown bready character, but it also has just a little bit of an almost kind of cakey type vibe to it, and I get a bit more of the kind of nuttiness pushing its way through in that border region there too. But the base of that front third of your palate, you've got the rye bready bread crust, you've got a little bit of the rye bread on top, and then the pumpernickel bread, and then for me you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just kind of push their way out of the beer. So let's focus on that fruity side of things for the moment. So yeah, the fruity side of this beer is really interesting because the fruity side is very akin to what we were picking up in the aroma. So in the back of that front third of your palate, you do get a little bit of juicy plum on the top, but the back of that front third of your palate, it's very datey. You're getting a lot of sultana out of it as well, and yeah, a lot of date, a lot of sultanas. I'd maybe say it's more of a prune than a plum actually that I'm getting in this one, and the fruity side of this beer leans more toward these kind of dry fruits rather than anything else. So yeah, you've got prunes, dates, sultanas underneath. As you move further forward into the middle of that front third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of a juicy and sharper kind of figgy character coming out of this one. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together in that sense, I think is really quite nice. Yeah, nice big kind of juicy figgy character coming out of the beer there. But as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, it gets really interesting too. On top of the fig, you've maybe got quite a little bit of an oily pear, but then yeah, you get quite a heavy and very slightly sharp blackcurrant note forming the basis of the front half of that front third of your palate. So yeah, definitely a little bit of a quite a lot of blackcurrant on the front, that front part of the front third of your palate too. But yeah, I do like the fruitiness in this beer and how it goes from that perspective. But yeah, I think the fruitiness for me, lots of plum, good little bit of prune. Well, not so much plum, quite a lot of prune. That's what I meant to say. Date underneath, a little bit of sultana in the middle, fig underneath, pear on the top, and then yeah, the front part of the front third of your palate is more of a kind of big, juicy, slightly oily blackcurrant, but it works. It is very, very nice. I think that's everything we need to say about the flavour of this beer. So let's round off the review with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So for me, the mouthfeel of this beer, I'd say it's top end of mid-bodied. The carbonation is very smooth. The beer does have a degree of an oily slickness to it, which you kind of expect from this style. But it is a lager beer, so it is still, fairly light and kind of drinkable in a sense. So yeah, it makes sense. A little bit of oily slickness, smooth carbonation, and yeah, quite a slick beer with this one. But it gets drier and drier the further into the aftertaste that you go. IBU wise, this is interesting because I think from the hoppy side of things, it's about 20 or 25-ish IBUs, but the dryness that you get out of several aspects of this one could push that IBU count up a little bit. So yeah, there's a wee bit of that going on in this one. So yeah, perceived bitterness and calculated bitterness in this beer might be a little bit different. But the malt base certainly has a bit of dryness underneath and a bit of toastiness there. Lovely smoothness in the middle, then a bit of a drier sweetness on top. But yeah, the sweetness of this beer, as I say, the brown sugary notes are the most the most complex part of the beer. Then on the fruity side of things, a lot of red fruit, but it leans more toward a kind of dry, fruity type character as well. But overall, really interesting Doppelbock for me. The fruity character and the brown sugary notes are kind of what sets it apart from the other ones, and also the mouthfeel just feels that little bit lighter actually. So yeah, I think that's a good point to a good place to leave it with this one. So yeah, let's leave it there. This one was the Triumphator, a 7.6% Doppelbock from Löwenbräu, one of the famous Munich 6 breweries. Definitely quite different in its fruity character and more leaning toward the kind of brown sugary side of things than many of its counterparts that you would find from the other Munich 6 breweries. So yeah, awesome stuff. Certainly wouldn't hesitate to drink it again. But once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Löwenbräu as well. And we will see about returning to these guys again at some point in the near future, because I haven't covered enough of this brewery, and that is something that I really do need to fix. But until then, Slàinte, skål, cheers. Check out my social media, check out Löwenbräu's social media, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Ciao just now.